They say desperation can make you do things you never imagined. That when you're pushed to the very edge, when life strips you down to nothing, you start seeing choices you swore you'd never consider. I used to believe I was strong. I used to think I had standards, morals, a sense of right and wrong. But when you're drowning, when your world is crumbling piece by piece, when every door slams shut in your face, you start to wonder, how far would I go to survive? And that's when he came along. My landlord. I still remember the way he looked at me that day. The weight of his gaze. The way his voice, low and steady, carried something dangerous underneath. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a suggestion, not at first. But it was there. I take care of my people. Just 5 words. 5 words that shouldn't have meant anything. But at that moment, standing there, my heart pounding, my stomach twisted in knots, they felt like a lifeline. Like a temptation. Like a warning. I should have walked away. I should have said no. But instead, I listened. And that's where it all began. What have I done? If he ever finds out. This wasn't supposed to happen. But God help me. I wanted it. This is not a love story. This is not a fairy tale. This is real. Raw. Messy. This is the story of how one desperate moment led to a decision that changed everything. A decision I can never take back. If you've ever found yourself standing at the edge of a choice you never thought you'd make, if you've ever felt trapped, unseen, abandoned, then maybe you'll understand. Maybe you won't judge me. Maybe you've been there too. And before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. You never really know how fast life can fall apart until you're sitting in the middle of the wreckage, looking around, wondering when exactly the walls started closing in. I used to have a plan, a future, a marriage that, at the very least, felt like it meant something. But now I was just existing. No job, no money, bills stacking up so high I stopped opening them. It was easier to pretend they didn't exist than to face the cold, hard truth. I was drowning. And the worst part? I was drowning alone. My husband, God, I don't even know if I can call him that anymore, had checked out a long time ago. Physically, he was there. But emotionally? Mentally? He might as well have packed his bags and left years ago. And honestly, maybe that would have been easier. At least then I wouldn't have had to wake up every morning, look at his face, and remember what we used to be. What we were supposed to be. We used to talk. Laugh. I used to feel seen. Now, I was just another piece of furniture in the house, something he walked past without really noticing. When was the last time he looked at me like I was a woman? When was the last time I felt wanted? I had tried, you know? I had tried everything. The late-night conversations where I practically begged him to tell me what was wrong. The little gestures, making his favorite meals, leaving notes in his lunch, dressing up just a little more in hopes that maybe, just maybe, he'd see me again. But nothing worked. It was like throwing pebbles into a black hole, watching them disappear without a sound. And so, eventually, I stopped trying. The apartment was falling apart just as much as I was. Peeling paint. Water stains on the ceiling. A kitchen sink that never fully drained. It smelled like old carpet and regret, and no matter how hard I tried to make it feel like home, it never did. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. We had dreams once, plans for something better. But better never came. Instead, we got stuck. And the longer we stayed, the more it felt like we weren't just trapped in that apartment. We were trapped in a life neither of us wanted anymore. The eviction notice had been sitting on the counter for days, taunting me every time I walked by. I knew what it said before I even opened it. Past due. Final warning. Pay up or get out. I felt my stomach twist every time I looked at it, but I didn't know what else to do. My bank account was empty. My credit cards were maxed out. And my husband? If he even noticed, he didn't say a damn word. We'll figure it out, he had mumbled once, barely glancing up from his phone. That was it. That was the extent of his concern. I wanted to scream at him, shake him, make him see me. We're sinking. But what was the point? He didn't care. Not about me, not about us, not about anything. So I sat there, staring at the paper, feeling the walls close in just a little more. Feeling that suffocating weight pressed down on my chest. And then there was him. My landlord. He wasn't the kind of man you ignored. He had a presence, one of those men who could walk into a room, say nothing, and still demand attention. Tall, broad shoulders, skin the color of polished mahogany. A deep, steady voice that made you listen whether you wanted to or not. He wasn't just confident. He was the kind of man who knew he had power and knew exactly how to use it. I had never really paid much attention to him before. He was just there. Collected the rent. Made the repairs when he felt like it. But then, things changed. Or maybe I changed. Maybe it was the way I started noticing how his eyes lingered a little too long when we spoke. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, really looked at me, like I was something worth seeing. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. That I was just so starved for attention, for something, anything, that I was reading too much into things. But deep down, I knew. I knew by the way his hand would rest just a second too long when he handed me back my receipt. By the way his gaze would flicker down, almost imperceptibly, before meeting my eyes again. By the way his voice would drop just a little lower when he spoke to me, like there was something else behind his words. And then there was that day. The day he showed up at my door, casual as ever, leaning against the frame like he had all the time in the world. He had that look, that unreadable expression that made my stomach tighten. And then he said it. "You're late on rent." I swallowed hard, nodding, my fingers twisting together. "I know. I'm working on it. Are you?" I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, reading every little flicker of emotion on my face. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. He had this way of holding your attention, like once he had it, he wasn't going to let go. "I take care of my people," he said, his voice smooth, deliberate. "If they take care of me." My breath caught. My pulse pounded in my ears. I knew what he meant. Or at least, I thought I did. But I didn't say anything. I just stood there, frozen, torn between panic and something else. Something I didn't want to name. He gave me a slow, knowing smile. "Think about it," he said. And then he walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart racing, my thoughts spiraling, my body trembling with something I couldn't quite understand. That was the moment everything changed. The moment that planted a seed, deep inside me, one that would grow into something I could never take back. Because no matter how much I wanted to tell myself that I would never, the truth was, I already had. I told myself I wouldn't think about it. That it was just words, just a passing moment, nothing more. But words have weight. And once they settle in your mind, they don't leave so easily. I tried to go about my day like normal, but everything felt different. The air felt heavier. The walls of my apartment seemed to press in just a little tighter. Every time I walked past that eviction notice, my chest squeezed so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. I needed a plan. A miracle. But there was none. And then it happened. I wasn't trying to see him. In fact, I was trying to avoid him. I told myself if I could just keep my head down, stay out of sight, then maybe he'd forget. Maybe I'd forget. But fate has a way of putting you exactly where you don't want to be. I was coming up the stairs, balancing a grocery bag in one arm, fumbling for my keys, when I felt it, that feeling of being watched. That low, knowing presence before I even turned my head. "You been avoiding me?" His voice slid through the air like warm honey, smooth but thick with something unspoken. My breath caught for just a second, and when I turned, he was there. Standing at the top of the stairs, one hand resting against the railing, watching me like he already knew the answer. No, I lied. Too fast, too sharp. He smiled. Just a little. Like he knew I was lying but didn't mind. Like he found it amusing. "Good," he said, stepping closer. "Because we still got some things to discuss." My voice caught. My fingers clenched around the keys. "I told you, I'm working on it." Working on it. He repeated the words slowly, like he was tasting them, deciding whether he believed me. "And how's that going?" I wanted to tell him to mind his business. That I'd figure it out. But we both knew that was a lie. And he wasn't the type of man you lied to easily. "I just need more time." Time's running out, sweetheart. Sweetheart. My stomach twisted. Not just because of what he said, but because of the way he said it. The way his voice dipped just enough to make me notice. Just enough to make something inside me tighten. Look. He exhaled, running a hand down his jaw. I get it. Times are tough. But I take care of my people. There it was again. That phrase. That thing I had tried to pretend I didn't hear the first time. I forced out a nervous laugh, shaking my head. I don't know what that means. Don't you? My pulse was a drum in my ears. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because I did know. I knew exactly what he meant. And yet, he hadn't really said anything at all. His eyes never left mine. Deep. Dark. Searching. Think about it, he murmured. Let me know. And then, he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he had been. My breath coming too fast, my thoughts tangled into knots. My fingers clenched and unclenched around my keys, my grocery bag forgotten at my feet. I should have felt disgusted. Angry. But instead, I felt something I didn't want to name. Something that crawled under my skin and settled deep in my bones. Curiosity. I hated myself for it. But I couldn't stop wondering. What exactly would it mean, to be taken care of? I tried to push it out of my head. I told myself it wasn't real. That I was imagining things. That I had twisted his words into something they weren't. But the truth? The truth was, I hadn't stopped thinking about it since he said it. I take care of my people. It played in my head like a song on repeat. A whisper in the dark. A thought I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. And the more I fought it, the louder it got. What was wrong with me? I should have been disgusted. Furious. Offended. But instead, I felt something far worse. Temptation. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of overdue bills, my hands gripping the edges so tightly my knuckles ached. Rent. Utilities. Credit card debt piled so high I could barely see over it. And my husband. He still hadn't said a word. He still hadn't noticed. It was like I was screaming into the void and he was deaf to it. Or maybe he just didn't care. I thought about telling him. I thought about sitting him down, putting the bills in front of him, making him see just how close we were to losing everything. But I already knew how that conversation would go. I'm working on it, he'd say, barely looking up from his phone. We'll figure it out. And then that would be it. No plan. No urgency. Just blind, empty hope that somehow, things would magically fix themselves. But they wouldn't. Because hope didn't pay the rent. And neither did love, not that we had much of that left either. When did we become strangers? I thought back to the beginning. To the way he used to look at me. The way he used to touch me, like I was the only woman in the world. We had dreams once. Plans. A future that felt solid beneath our feet. And now? Now we barely spoke. We slept in the same bed, but it might as well have been separate planets. I couldn't remember the last time he reached for me. The last time he kissed me without it feeling like an obligation. I had become invisible. A ghost in my own marriage. Maybe that was why the landlord's words hit me so hard. Maybe it wasn't just about the money. Maybe it was the way he looked at me. Like I wasn't invisible. Like I was something worth seeing. But it was wrong. I knew that. I wasn't that kind of woman. I wasn't someone who made deals like that. Who even considered something like that. Right? But what choice did I have? I could sit here and pretend that there was some miracle coming, but there wasn't. The landlord's words weren't just temptation. They were a lifeline. A way out of this crushing weight pressing down on me. It wasn't just me who would suffer if I lost this apartment. It was my husband. My kids. How could I let that happen? It's not like I have a choice. Funny how easy it is to justify something when you're desperate. And then, as if the universe was playing a cruel joke on me, I ran into him again. It was in the hallway this time. I had gone to throw the trash out, and when I turned around, there he was. Leaning against the door frame of an empty apartment, arms crossed, watching me. My pulse jumped. Just for a second. Just long enough to make me hate myself for it. You think about what I said? His voice was smooth, steady, like he already knew the answer. I shook my head, forcing out a weak laugh. I don't know what you mean. He smirked. Slow. Knowing. Sure you do. I should have walked away. I should have shut it down right then and there. But instead, I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of his gaze crawl over my skin like a touch I hadn't asked for, but maybe, just maybe, didn't completely hate. What the hell was I doing? This was dangerous. This was wrong. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told myself I wouldn't see him again. That I would keep my head down, pay my rent another way, figure something out. That if I just avoided him long enough, this feeling, this gnawing, twisting thing inside me, would go away. But fate has a way of ignoring the things we want. It started small. At first, it was just moments. Fleeting, inconsequential, or at least, that's what I told myself. A glance across the hallway, the way his eyes would linger just a second too long when he saw me. The slight smirk tugging at the corner of his lips when I fumbled my keys, when I avoided his gaze, when I pretended like I didn't feel the air shift every time he was near. But then it became more. The first time he touched me, it was nothing. Or at least, it should have been nothing. Just a brush of fingers as he passed me in the stairwell, the briefest pressure against my arm, a fleeting warmth before he was gone. But my skin burned where he touched me. And long after I was alone again, I could still feel it. Like an ember buried under my skin, waiting to catch fire. I started noticing things about him that I shouldn't have. The way he moved, confident, deliberate. The way his voice dipped when he spoke to me, like we had some kind of secret between us. The way he smelled, clean, masculine, a hint of something dark and rich that stayed in the air after he was gone. And then, the worst part. I started wondering. I wondered what his hands would feel like on me, not just in passing, but deliberate. I wondered what it would be like to be looked at the way he looked at me, like I was something worth having, something worth wanting. I wondered what it would be like to feel like a woman again. I hated myself for it. But I couldn't stop. And then, just when I thought I had it under control, he pushed things further. It was late. My husband wasn't home. He had barely been home at all lately, working late, coming back after I was already in bed, muttering a half-hearted apology before rolling over and falling asleep like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. I was taking the trash out, trying to clear my head, when I felt him before I saw him. "You're up late." I turned, and there he was, leaning against the railing of the stairwell, watching me with that same unreadable expression. Like he knew things about me I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. "Couldn't sleep," I said, my voice too quiet, too breathless. He nodded, slow and deliberate, like he was considering something. And then, just as I stepped forward, just as I moved past him, his hand caught my wrist. My pulse jumped. His touch was light, almost silence. The space between breaths. "You don't have to keep pretending," he murmured. "I know you've been thinking about it." A slow exhale. A moment too long. My heart hammering in my chest so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Thinking about what?" I whispered, though we both knew the answer. His grip tightened, just slightly, just enough to make me stay. "You know," he said, his voice low, steady. "And you know where to find me when you're ready." I walked away. I made myself walk away. But I felt it, his eyes on me, the ghost of his touch, the weight of his words pressing down on me like a promise. Like a challenge. This was no longer just about rent. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something irreversible. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop it anymore. There are moments in life when you just know. You're standing at the edge of something you can't come back from. You can feel it, deep in your bones. Like gravity shifting beneath your feet, like the air itself thickening around you, like the universe is holding its breath, waiting to see what you'll do. That night, that was my moment. I told myself I was just going for a walk. That I needed fresh air. That if I sat in that apartment 1 second longer, suffocating under the weight of bills, of loneliness, of everything I had lost, I might just lose my mind. But I knew where I was going before I even left the apartment. Before I even made it down the stairs, I knew. He was waiting for me. Took you long enough. His voice was low, smooth, like he had all the time in the world. Like he wasn't surprised to see me. Like he knew this would happen sooner or later. I should have turned around right then. I should have walked away, gone back upstairs, pretended this never happened. But I didn't. I don't know why I'm here, I whispered, even though we both knew that was a lie. He stepped closer. Slow. Deliberate. Yeah, you do. I could smell him, clean, masculine, something rich and dark that made my stomach twist in ways I didn't understand. My pulse was hammering in my ears. My hands curled into fists at my sides, as if I could hold on to the last sliver of control I had left. Did you think about what I said? He asked, his voice dipping lower. I swallowed hard. Nodded. My voice caught. I didn't know how to say it. How to put into words the war raging inside me. And a single word. A question. A challenge. I can't, I whispered, shaking my head. I shouldn't. But even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. How unconvincing. Because deep down, a part of me, maybe a bigger part than I wanted to admit, wasn't sure I meant it. His fingers brushed against my arm, light, barely there, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. Enough to make me close my eyes for half a second too long. Enough to make something inside me snap. Tell me to stop, he murmured. My mouth opened. The words were right there. 3 simple words. But I didn't say them. His hand cupped my jaw, tilting my face up to his thumb brushing against my cheek. His touch was warm, firm, unrelenting. My body betrayed me before my mind could catch up, leaning into him, into the heat, into the way his presence swallowed me whole. And then, he kissed me. It was slow at first. Testing. A question more than a demand. But the second I responded, the second I let my lips part, let my fingers clutch at his shirt, let myself lean in, that was it. It was over. I don't know how long it lasted. Time didn't exist. It was just heat and hands and desperation, and the overwhelming, dizzying realization that I had done it. That I had crossed the line I swore I never would. And then, I pulled away. My voice broke. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. His eyes were steady, dark, unreadable. He didn't say anything. He just waited. Because he knew. He knew that I wasn't just fighting him. I was fighting myself. I turned and walked away. I don't even remember making it back to my apartment, back inside, back to the cold emptiness of my bed. All I remember is the feeling. The thrill still buzzing under my skin, electric and undeniable. And the crushing guilt wrapping around my throat, suffocating me. I saw my reflection in the bathroom mirror later that night. My lips were swollen. My cheeks were flushed. I stared at myself for a long time, trying to understand what I had done, who I had become. But the woman looking back at me, she was a stranger. The next morning, everything was the same. The sun still rose. The walls of my apartment still stood. My husband still sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee like nothing had changed. Like the world hadn't cracked open beneath my feet. But it had, and I was the only one who knew it. I couldn't look at him. Not directly. Not for too long. Every time I tried, my stomach twisted itself into knots. My skin burned with the memory of what I had done, of how it had felt, of how easy it had been. I thought guilt would come in waves, that it would crash over me all at once. But it didn't. It settled in quietly, like a shadow slipping into the room, curling into the corners of my mind, whispering things I didn't want to hear. Morning, he mumbled, not even glancing up from his phone. My throat was dry. My hands trembled when I reached for my coffee. I forced myself to breathe. Forced myself to act normal. Morning, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. Maybe I could have confessed everything right then, laid it all out in front of him, and it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe it would have just been another thing for him to ignore. Maybe that's why I had done it in the first place. The landlord, though. He acted like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Like we hadn't set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. The next time I saw him, he was leaning against his truck, arms crossed, that same unreadable expression on his face. My heart stuttered, my pulse tripping over itself. I told myself to keep walking, to act like I didn't see him, but my body betrayed me. My feet slowed. My breath caught. I could still feel his hands on me, the weight of his touch pressing against my skin like a brand. "You look tense," he said, amusement flickering in his voice. "I'm fine." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. "Yeah?" He took a step closer. Slow, casual, like he wasn't invading my space. Like he wasn't completely unraveling me with just his presence. "You sure?" I swallowed hard, my gaze darting toward the street, toward the windows of my apartment, toward anywhere but him. I stopped. There was nothing to say. No words that would make this go away. His smirk deepened, his eyes dragging over me, slow and knowing. "Relax," he murmured. "I ain't gonna say anything." That was the first moment I realized he held power over me now. Not in a way that was obvious. He never said it outright. But it was there, lingering in the way he spoke, in the way he looked at me. He knew what I had to lose. And worse? He knew I had already chosen to risk it once. "Just let me know if you need anything," he added, his voice dipping lower, his meaning clear. And then he was gone. Just like that. I stood there for a long time, my hands shaking, my breath uneven. My mind raced with all the worst possibilities. What if he changed his mind? What if he told someone? What if my husband found out? What if I wasn't as done with this as I told myself I was? I should have felt nothing but regret. But the truth? The truth was, part of me, some dark, hidden part one didn't want to admit existed, was already wondering when I would see him again. I thought the guilt would get easier. That if I just went about my days, if I kept my head down, if I pretended hard enough, it would fade. But guilt doesn't work that way. It doesn't dissolve. It doesn't disappear. It lingers, curling into the corners of your mind, whispering when everything else is quiet. And the worst part? It wasn't the only thing I felt. I hated myself for it, but part of me, some terrible, shameful part, wasn't just drowning in regret. It was drowning in longing. Longing for something I couldn't name. Something I had tried to bury long before this ever happened. Something that had been missing for so long, I had almost forgotten what it felt like. And then, in one reckless moment, I had found it again. Was it desperation? That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. That it was survival, nothing more. That I had been pushed to the edge, that I had been out of options, that I had made a choice I never would have considered if things had been different. But deep down, in the place where the truth never hides, I knew better. Because if it was just desperation, then why did I keep thinking about him? Why did I still feel the ghost of his hands on me, weeks later? Why did I hear his voice in my head at night, low and steady, laced with something that made my skin burn? Why did I catch myself looking for him? Watching for him? Why did my stomach tighten when I saw his truck parked outside? Why did my breath hitch when I caught a glimpse of him through my window? Why did I feel more alive in the moments I should have regretted the most? I could live with guilt. I had done it before. I had spent years carrying the weight of a marriage that had withered right in front of me, convincing myself it was just a phase, that things would get better, that love could survive neglect. That if I was just patient, just understanding enough, eventually, he would come back to me. But he never did. So maybe that was my real sin. Not the betrayal. Not the choice I had made in the dark with shaking hands and a racing heart. But the fact that even before it happened, a part of me had already been lost. A part of me had already given up. And now? Now I had to ask myself a question I wasn't ready to answer. Can I live with this? Because there were only two options. Bury it. Pretend it never happened. Swallow the guilt, carry it like a secret, let it settle into my bones and hope it didn't consume me. Or tell the truth. And destroy everything. I thought about it sometimes. What it would look like. The confession. The fallout. The wreckage that would follow. I pictured my husband's face, how it would change, how his eyes would darken with something I hadn't seen in years. Not love. Not passion. But anger. Betrayal. The realization that he had never really known me at all. And maybe that was true. Maybe he didn't know me anymore. Maybe I didn't know myself. But if I told him, if I let the truth out into the world where it couldn't be taken back, what then? Would it free me? Or would it ruin me? So now I ask you, what would you have done? If you were standing at the same crossroads I was, with everything crumbling around you, with the weight of the world pressing down on your shoulders, with no one, to turn to, would you have walked away? Or would you have done what I did? Maybe you'd like to believe you'd have made the right choice. That you'd have held on to your morals, your dignity, your loyalty. But be honest with yourself. Would you? Or would you have let yourself slip, just once? Just to feel something again? Just to escape, if only for a moment? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you would have done. Because I need to know, am I the only one? And if you want more stories like this, stories that peel back the layers of human nature, that force you to look at the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore, then subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga. Because trust me, there are more stories to tell. Loneliness and desperation, they're a dangerous mix. You think you'd never cross a line until the line is behind you. And then, it's too late. Because once you open that door, you can never close it again.